Well, why don't we find out? Let's jump into game one and see, as you mentioned, Lee, which weather is going to be victorious. Whether it maybe changes up per game, who knows? Let's have a little look what goes on. We've got the Entei and the Raichu coming out here for Juan, and it is going to be the Venusaur and the Regigigas there for Davide. So no Weezing coming out onto the field, so the slow start ability on Regigigas will be in play at the moment, but of course Davide could switch in that Weezing at any time and then set that Regigigas into action.
Yeah, the Regigigas obviously hindered now by that slow start ability, you know, not in a bad spot, especially if the Weezing comes onto the field. It will remove the inner focus ability from the Entei and obviously the Lightning Rod as well, which isn't really playing into effect now. But there's also the play where Davide could switch out that Regigigas and bring in the Torkoal and really start to take advantage of the Venusaur, go for the Gigantamax there and do some big damage into something like Entei. But always doing that, there is the risk of taking big fire type of damage yourself, so not something you maybe want to go for this early on in the game.
Well, the Weezing has jumped into the field. Neutralizing gas is in effect, and this is going to negate all of the abilities. They're going to be null and void on the field while Weezing is sitting there. So the Lightning Rod will go from that Raichu, the slow start will go away from the Regigigas, and in a focus from that Entei as well. But Regigigas going to be going for the Dynamax here, and it can apply so much pressure. It has so many different move options that it can go for. It's going to be interesting what Davide wants to lock into here. You know, you could even go for something like a Max Strike, lower the speed of your opposing Pokemon as well. Just so many different options. But Juan is actually going to go for the Dynamax as well, going for that Entei. Amazing to see this Pokemon come up into the Dynamax form. As you mentioned, Lee, it can apply a lot of pressure with something like a Max Flare as well, that's going to be dealing a lot of damage, and set the sun up as well, dealing even more damage with those Max Flares going forward. Raichu, however, just going to help out by going for a little cheeky Nuzzle, gets the critical hit as well, but paralyzes that Regigigas, and that might come in critical if Regigigas is unable to move. Entei going to go for the Max Flare. It is indeed the double up. Going to be doing about, looks about a quarter of damage there against that Regigigas. So just chipping away, but critically setting up that sun as well to boost up the moves going forward as Regigigas goes for that Max Strike. Is going to connect into the Entei and does a huge amount of damage. Remember, this is a Dynamax Pokemon. If it hadn't Dynamax, that would have been a very solid KO. And it also lowers the speed of that Raichu.
Yeah, the Raichu there showing why it's such a good support Pokemon with that Nuzzle, because, you know, otherwise the Regigigas, once that Weezing switches onto the field, it's going to be hitting the Entei first and doing a lot of damage, reducing its speed even more. But the Nuzzle there really kind of flipping the tables and keeping Juan in the lead here almost with the Entei. It's still going to outspeed it going into this turn. Obviously that Regigigas is -2 technically from the paralysis here, so it's still got another turn to have to reset it with another Max Strike. It is going to be threatening the knockout here, so Entei needs to be very aware of that. Is Juan going to adjust his board position, maybe get some more support in next to it to help him out a little bit?
Well, Weezing now going to be able to outspeed that Raichu thanks to the speed drop, and goes for the Sludge Bomb, just breaking a potential Focus Sash there as Nuzzle comes out and also connects onto the Weezing. So both of Davide's Pokemon here are now paralyzed. Entei able to go for that Max Flare, connecting down onto the Regigigas. In the sun, it is not enough to pick up a KO though, but Regigigas is certainly not looking the healthiest. Able to fire up a Max Strike though, breaking through any potential paralysis, and it picks up the KO against that Entei. So a big sort of sigh of relief there for Davide. You've got rid of the Dynamax Pokemon on Juan's side. It does of course give Juan the opportunity to bring in a Pokemon from the back, and with Regigigas at such low HP and paralyzed, I'm unsure it will be able to get off another attack.
Yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate to lose your Dynamax Pokemon like that, but I think it's probably part of Juan's game plan here, you know, knowing how offensively great and strong that the Regigigas can be. You want to really nullify it as best you can through the Nuzzle, which we saw do very well, and then obviously just get it down to a low enough health where you can bring something in from the back to outspeed it still and pick up that knockout. And we do see the Politoed come in, but that strange interaction between the neutralizing gas not allowing the rain to set up, which you would normally see here. And as long as that Weezing is sticking around, Politoed's going to have a little bit of a harder time to get its rain up on the field now, especially without the ability to Dynamax and kind of set it up itself.
Yeah, not something we're used to seeing, a Politoed joining the field and no rain coming into effect. But that could definitely be an issue for Juan if he has got that Kingdra in the back. You really want to be able to bring the Kingdra into the rainy environment so that it can utilize its Swift Swim ability. Weezing, however, is going to be paralyzed here, not going to be able to move as Politoed goes for the Hydro Pump. Is going to be able to connect, going straight down into that Weezing, but of course the sun still being up on the field is going to stop the damage output from that Weezing, able to survive. Regigigas, however, not so fortunate, takes the Thunderbolt from that Raichu and will be KO. But this does give Davide the opportunity to bring in a Pokemon from the back now. You know, a lot of what Regigigas did doesn't really affect the game going forward. It lowered the speed, sure, of that Raichu, but it's still being able to do a good job. And Davide now has to be careful because the Weezing on the field is going to suppress the ability of the partner Pokemon. That partner Pokemon is Venusaur. With the Chlorophyll ability, it wants to make the use of the sun and have its speed doubled, but that's not going to happen while Weezing's there.
Yeah, it's very difficult because now Venusaur in a position where it can get nuzzled, like you say, and it can potentially, Politoed has access to moves that can hit it for super effective damage, like Ice Beam and things like that. So maybe it's a time for Davide to think about that. Has he got something like Torkoal in the back that he can switch in here, get that sun definitely on the field, activate that Chlorophyll ability, but you've got to be careful because obviously if we see the Politoed switch out at the same time, predicting this play, and then the Politoed can come in on the Torkoal, it's going to make things very difficult, and it doesn't really stop you and get around the fact that you have to prevent that Nuzzle coming into your Venusaur to get the most out of it going into this next turn.
100%. And the interactions here would be very interesting because as soon as the Weezing leaves the field, the abilities all come back into effect. And if that Politoed was still on the field, the Drizzle would have activated, Rain would be in effect, and then the Torkoal switching in here for Davide would overwrite that. So a really great switch over there from Juan, being able to bring the Politoed in the back, making sure it can use its ability later on. Venusaur, however, very happy with the Sunshine, goes for that very speedy Sleep Powder, connecting onto the Raichu that can't get up to any more mischief, paralyzing any more of Davide's Pokemon. They can breathe a sigh of relief from that regard. Rillaboom, however, has joined the field for Juan, and, you know, Torkoal's going to be pretty happy about that. Those Fire-type moves are really going to hurt.
Yeah, they're going to do a lot of damage, but you've got to be aware at the same time that the Politoed could come back onto the field. Maybe in replace of the Raichu slot potentially, and allow the Rillaboom to try and get some damage off onto maybe the Venusaur, although it doesn't really have the move pool to get and make use of that. It does have access to things like knockoff, so you can get decent damage onto it. But if you've got something like higher horsepower, maybe getting the Politoed onto the field, we're getting rid of the Chlorophyll ability as well, and just trying to get damage onto the opposing weather Pokemon might be a way to go about, and especially in the Torkoal slot, if you predict a switch there, if the Weezing does come in on that slot, at least you're hitting it for good damage and getting some return on your move as well.
Well, Raichu going to be leaving the field. It couldn't really do much while it was taking the nap, so Politoed's going to jump in and help out by changing up the weather, like you said, Lee, protecting that Rillaboom from any Fire-type moves, but it's not going to save it from any Poison-type moves, and it also gets the poison. That Venusaur really doing so well here, putting one Pokemon to sleep and poisoning another. The high horsepower you mentioned, though, is going to connect onto that Venusaur, leaving Torkoal free to go for the body press, and following up into that Rillaboom. Well, the poison was just like a little bit of sort of showmanship there a little bit. You know, the Torkoal is able to pick up the KO against the Rillaboom before we even see poison come into effect. But I mean, what an amazing damage dealing turn there for Davide.
Yeah, I mean, picking out the moves perfectly there, going for that huge damage with the Sludge Bomb onto the Rillaboom there, and making sure that, you know, if the turn that he's suspecting in his head that did play out with the Politoed coming back onto the field, he's not getting punished for that, and he's getting some return. And yeah, making this, I think the sleep onto the Raichu as well, which meant that Juan wasn't able to get that nuzzle off onto the Venusaur, has really made things very difficult. And even in the rain, these two, the Torkoal and the Venusaur, are going to be very problematic for this Politoed Raichu combination to deal with from Juan's side.
I mean, the switch out with the Raichu as well does allow it to reset those speed drops that it took from the max strikes. But when it's sleeping, it really can't do a lot at this stage. It needs to be able to wake up, start going for those nuzzles. Davide going to be able to switch in the Weezing here, again, just negating abilities here on the field, but I don't think any of them really come into play at the moment. They're kind of all set up in the way that they need to be. Raichu is going to be taking a little bit of a nap as Venusaur goes for that Leaf Storm, targeting down into the Politoed, boosting up from that grassy terrain as well. It's going to be a really solid KO against it, and although Venusaur does have its special attack dropped by that Leaf Storm, it does have the ability to switch out in place of that Torkoal for Davide, set up the Sun, and then it can come back in not only with its stats reset, but in a sort of environment that it would want to be in.
Yeah, definitely, and that's an easy option for Davide here. He's created a really good win condition at the end here, and the Raichu pretty helpless as well against the Venusaur, you know, with normally relying on just electric type attacks because of the support options that it has there. The options to hit the Venusaur for good damage aren't really there, unfortunately. So, like you say, there is the option just to get the Torkoal back onto the field, overwrite the rain, get that sun up that Venusaur loves, and do some big damage through something like an Earth Power that we know that Venusaur generally does carry.
Yeah, that's the thing. Poor Raichu here is going to have to take that Earth Power that you mentioned. You know, the Sun going to boost up the speed. Raichu, however, going to be able to take that reasonably well here and does manage to wake up, going for that Thunderbolt. Going to be able to connect down into the Venusaur, but it's not enough to pick up a KO. And I think this is the problem here with the Raichu. It's such a great Pokemon as a partner to be good support. Having that Lightning Rod to draw in Electric-type attacks, having access to things like Fake Out and Nuzzle can allow it to cause a lot of disruption to the opponent's Pokemon. But on its own, particularly with single target type attacks, it's just not going to be able to deal enough damage against both of these Pokemon here. You know, it's not going to deal anything remotely super effective. Raichu going to have to take another one of those Earth Powers, and it will get the special defense drop as well, which is not what you want to do when you're facing down against two special attackers. Nuzzle connecting into the Torkoal, though, might potentially get a paralysis here, so Torkoal not able to follow up, but instead going for a body press into that Raichu and picks up the KO. So Davide able to take game one in the set of winners semis.
Yeah, a really nice game there from Davide. Made it very difficult Juan to gain any momentum there. And you thought after the Entei play, coming in and getting the Regigigas down to a point where it was going to be knocked out by just the Raichu in the end, it turned out to be. It was a very good use of Entei. But then, obviously, when you've got the Politoed, you've got the rain, you've got the weather support, but you don't really have that offensive threat to really attack the Venusaur after your Entei's lost. And it might have been, you know, I'm sure that he would have probably preferred to keep the Entei, so when the Venusaur did make an appearance, at least you've got that outlet to kind of deal with it. And then you've also got the way to disrupt the weather as well. The Weezing there proving quite pivotal in the match there for Davide as well. You know, the way he was using it to interact with the Regigigas to start with, and then utilising it to kind of deny abilities later on in the game really came in useful. But the Sleep Powder, I think, was probably the key thing on the Raichu there to really close the game out and make it a lot simpler for him in that first one.
No, I love the way Davide played that game one. There's so many different calculations and mechanics you have to be aware of all at one time when you're playing with a Pokemon like Weezing. You know, there were terrains that had to be considered, weather, different abilities, speed tiers as well, if those abilities were to come into effect. And he masterfully was able to do that. You know, stayed really kind of calm, cool and collected, was able to really think, if I bring out my Weezing now, what is the turn of events going to be? How are things all going to play out? And wanting to make sure that by the end of that turn, once all the animations and interactions are done, that he has the advantage. And it can be so easy, particularly when that timer is ticking down, to maybe miss a step or two, and it can be so detrimental to your gameplay.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that it takes a lot to play and a lot of thought to play the Weezing, and there's a real art to getting it right. And we saw there that Davide got it right from the start, you know, and having that really oppressive mode in the back of the Venusaur and the Torkoal that doesn't really rely on a Dynamax or a Gigantamax. A lot of the time, you know, we do see Gigantamax Venusaur, but it can operate without that. And specifically with that Sleep Powder as well, it's so disruptive for opponents, and it's another layer for opponents to really consider when trying to beat that. And Rain always has a hard time against Sun. But if you're Rain and you want to disrupt the Sun, you're going to have to bring something that really hits those, you know, the big powerhouses that, you know, like Venusaur, super effective damage. You need something. Maybe the Kingdra is an answer there. It does have max airstream. You get that into a position in the rain, you're going to really be able to take advantage of it and do some big damage to things like Venusaur. And you can also set your own rain up through your Dynamax mode. You know, you don't need to worry about neutralizing gas then. So that is an option for him to consider. But yeah, it's very difficult as well when you're considering the Regigigas and the Weezing as a big threat as well. So yeah, that's the first step to think about, and then you've got to think about the weather on top. It's a really nice build from Davide here, and it's making it very difficult for Juan to kind of get a little bit of a grip here. But all to play for still. We've still got game 2 coming up, Lou. So, you know, it's not over just yet.
Well, let's jump into that game 2, see if maybe the Kingdra is going to make an appearance. And like you said, Lee, it provides a lot of nice utility around that neutralizing gas if you want to set up the rain. But for Juan, it's going to be the Entei and the Raichu. And again, it's going to be Venusaur and Regigigas coming out here on the field for Davide. So the same leads as that game 1 coming out here in game 2. But I wonder if we are going to see the same Dynamax option there on Juan's side of the field. I mean, the Dynamax turns in turn 1 were so exciting last time, but they didn't really do a lot to set up for the end game position. It was sort of just, here's a KO, here's a KO.
Yeah, that's it. And it'd be interesting to see if Juan's maybe changed up the Pokemon in the back here, because I think one of the things you could potentially try and do is you know, like try and stall out maybe the Regigigas turns if that is the option for Davide here to go down, and maybe try and save your Dynamax for a little bit later on in this match, where you can, if you have got the Kingdra, Politoed in the back, you can maybe get that in a position where you've got weather control. And like I was saying before we came into this, take advantage of the weather that you've got access to, and a Dynamax Pokemon that can put a lot of damage onto things that are quite detrimental to your ability to take a game in this one.
Well, Davide going for the same strategy he went for in that game one, just switches in the Weezing from the back straight away to set that neutralizing gas in effect, allowing Regigigas to have its ability suppressed and be a formidable force here on the field. But nothing is stopping Juan from going for the same strategy as well, particularly with that Raichu. A Nuzzle going into that Regigigas. We did see it get paralyzed on the third turn of its Dynamax last turn. You know, that can be really debilitating to Regigigas' strategy, and that's exactly what's happening here. Entei, however, making the change and not going to Dynamax, just wants to go for a Protect here, maybe try and stay on the field a little bit longer, as Regigigas able to break through that first chance of paralysis and go for the Max Strike into Entei. You know, even through the Protect, that does a sizable chunk of damage, but Entei is going to be able to hang around. The one problem for Han, though, is that both of his Pokemon are going to be taking a speed drop now.
Yeah, that is a big problem, and now the Weezing probably going to be able to outspeed maybe the Entei, probably not the Raichu though, depending on how it's trained, of course. But the speed drop there going to be useful for when this Regigigas is kind of done with its Dynamax turns, and Juan just taking a turn to just stall out this Regigigas. Getting the Nuzzle off there is really nice as well. It's a very good option for him, you know, to slow this Regigigas down. There's always a chance that it can be fully paralyzed as well, so maybe that'll play into it going into this turn for Juan.
Yeah, Han deciding to go for that turn 2 Dynamax here. You know, Entei has taken a little bit of damage and does have the speed drop, but Weezing going for that Sludge Bomb. Entei going to be able to survive that, but gets the poison. These Sludge Bomb from Davide are really finding those secondary effects today. Thunderbolt coming out from the Raichu into Regigigas, just chipping away at a little bit more as Entei is able to go for that Max Flare. Now it's in Dynamax form, doubling into that Regigigas, going to take it to below 50% HP remaining. You know, Juan really does know this Regigigas, if he doesn't target it down, can do so much damage to his team. It's going to go for another Max Strike into that Entei. Oh, I'm not sure if it's going to be able to survive.
Wow.
No, it looks like it's gone down.
It has gone down. He's taken it down. It's done huge damage here. The Regigigas really showing why it's such a threat of a Pokemon, you know, with that slow start, not even in the equation here with the neutralizing gas from the Weezing. It's such a powerful Pokemon, and you know the Entei dealt with it pretty well in game 1, but there you thought, okay, well, you've stalled that one turn, you've Dynamaxed the second turn if you're Juan, the Entei can probably take another one, but surprisingly that has just done so much damage, and it's really put him a little bit behind in this match going into this next turn.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a shame as well. It's sort of a waste of the Dynamax. It was only able to get one turn of those potential 3 as well, and using the Max Flare as well sets up the Sun, and that's only going to benefit when you sort of look at the teams. The Venusaur that we know Davide's brought to this match as well, it will be very happy to switch in and take advantage of Chlorophyll if the Weezing wants to jump off the field as well. But while it stays there, you know, Juan doesn't have a way to set up the Rain. He hasn't got his Dynamax anymore for that Kingdra. Kingdra's going to have to take the Sludge Bomb, however. No poison this time, though, and it goes for a Draco Meteor, but Regigigas is able to survive on 19 HP. It will have its special attack drop, revealing the Life Orb on there as well, as Raichu's able to follow up with a Thunderbolt, though. So Juan's Pokemon can breathe a sigh of relief. They don't have to worry about that Regigigas anymore. Particularly in this turn, it was still to move, and that could have been really damaging, removing either the Kingdra or the Raichu from play.
Yeah, it's and it's a nice play to take advantage of that Nuzzle from earlier, the paralysis, just to remove it from the field before it can get another Max Strike off. And now the Venusaur coming onto the field, and it does have to be a little bit, you know, it has to be wary of what the Kingdra's carrying, but the fact is, as long as this Weezing's on the field for Davide, there's no way of a Politoed switching in and getting the Rain up, and you know, that is so disruptive because you need the Kingdra to be able to have the Rain to kind of function to its best potential here.
Yeah, with the Kingdra just going for a Protect, its special attack is going to be at -2 as well. So it's not going to be able to deal a lot of damage and just wants to protect itself here. But Raichu, once again, going to be falling asleep from a Sleep Powder from that Venusaur. Sludge Bomb going to come out as well from the Weezing, breaking any potential Focus Sash on there as well. And you know, poor Raichu, it keeps being sent to sleep here. It's not going to be able to go for a Nuzzle on either of these Pokemon, and the speed stats are going to kind of stay at that neutral state setting.
Yeah, and it, you know, the one thing that you would look at right here is how Juan's used these Dynamax Pokemon, and the Max Flare is really backfiring on him here because, you know, the Venusaur is able to come in once that Regigigas goes down and really take advantage of the Sun, and it's kind of free for Davide. And you know, with as long as that, like I've said, the Weezing's out on the field, you can't get your Rain up because of the neutralizing gas is such an issue. And now with the Chlorophyll and the combination of Sleep Powder, you're just going to be able to kind of start picking things off on Juan's team and really denying any use of being able to set the weather up like you want. And as you can see, the Raichu going down here, really limiting any further switching from Juan's side of the field.
Oh, Davide's fully in the driving seat at the moment here. You know, with Juan doing these switches and having a Pokemon asleep, there's zero offensive pressure coming out from that turn. It just allowed Davide to really kind of pick up that solid KO. And like you said, Lee, while the Weezing's on the field, there's not a lot that Juan could do about the weather. And Weezing is already at full HP. You know, the Venusaur and the Weezing combination together as well can start picking away damage at Juan's Pokemon. And if Juan's not able to gain the benefit of that Swift Swim with the rain as well, it's going to put him on such a back foot, particularly with the sun up in the sky. Those water type moves are not going to be able to deal as much damage.
No, definitely not. And, you know, especially if the Kingdra relies heavily for its flying type attack is Hurricane. With the sun up, it's really not a great move to be relying on. It's got low accuracy anyway outside of the rain. So to be kind of relying on that to hit the Venusaur potentially, it's not the best thing to be relying on as long as his sun is up. And as we are going to see, the final Pokemon for Davide is going to be the Torkoal to get that sun up finally and just instill it here on the field.
Yeah, well, Venusaur going to be able to pick up a KO straight away against that Politoed with that Leaf Storm. It doesn't even have the grassy terrain boosting it in this particular turn. It can do enough damage on its own. As Kingdra goes for the Hurricane, it's actually able to connect in Sun. That is very, very difficult to do on many occasions, but Venusaur going to be able to survive thanks to that Focus Sash as well. However, it will get that confusion, but Davide certainly has the utility to switch Venusaur out and not risk taking any of those confusion hits. But, I mean, amazing being able to switch in the Torkoal there. And, you know, we saw the rain for a glimmer. It was there for a couple of seconds when the Weezing left the field, but as soon as Torkoal arrives, it changes it right back to the sunshine. So Venusaur's going to be very happy, but gets herself off the field for now to bring that Weezing in and reset. Obviously, that confusion on the Venusaur as well. While the Kingdra goes for the Hydro Pump. It is in the sun. Does manage to connect, though, onto that Torkoal. Not enough to pick up a KO, though. The sun really helping out, and Torkoal is going to be in prime position to be able to fire off a move in retaliation. It also manages to eat its berry, regain a little bit of HP to ensure its longevity on the field going into this next turn. But instead, actually goes for a Yawn. So Davide playing it really kind of conservatively, making sure that he's going to be able to put these Pokemon to sleep and pick up KOs without having to worry about any retaliation.
Yeah, and he's just set this up again perfectly, utilising that Weezing like masterfully, you know, it's just amazing. And giving Juan that kind of sneak peek tease of the rain.